when you're dealing with someone who's met you for the first time and you're talking to them and then they start to see you have partial facial paralysis, what type of reaction do you like the best from a person that you're dealing with that is the most respectful reaction?
Honestly, probably the best reaction I get is no reaction. Holding eye contact, talking to people, or when you're in a conversation with a few different people and someone else will join, and the person I'm speaking to will no longer look at me. For the most part, people don't realize they're doing it. It's just a subtle thing that happens, but to someone like me who has experienced it more times than I can count, it's very apparent and it can be very demoralizing.
Just be normal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And one of the things I like to remind people too is if this was your mom, your dad, your sister, your brother, it's not going to matter to you because you love them regardless.
Yep.
Would you
Yep.
want them to hurt? Would you want them to feel discouraged about life or about being amongst society? I can almost guarantee you 99.9% of us would say hell no.
I like how you take strong positions on things that are like controversial, but you always take like the right position. I believe one of them that really stands out is this way of viewing disabled people, because like you mentioned that's your preferred term, but then there's a lot of these other alternative terms and like condescending attitudes towards people with disability. What's your stand on that?
Yeah, one of my biggest stances is to ask people what they prefer. Personally, for me, I don't mind the term disabled. I don't mind it one bit, but there are people out there who do mind. We're all individuals, and it does all come down to personal preference, I believe. I usually say, hey, if you don't know, just ask. Yeah, we're not gonna bite your head off. It might make us feel uncomfortable to call something out or to even ask how someone prefers to be talked about. I think it really shows a sign of respect for people as individual to refer to them the way that they would like to be referred to. If we want people to become examples and go out into the world and be leaders as well, we need to embody our philosophies and be a good example. And you're a dad. We have to show our kids these good examples, but it doesn't just stop there. It goes beyond the home into the workplace, into the world in general.
I think you hit on something really good there because, like, as I read up about you and I've known you, you seem to be really on this change wagon. You're really about like not staying stuck in place.
Really, I think life is about going with the flow. Even though I would kind of categorize myself as a more type A person, I have learned throughout my life that, you can plan for everything, but ultimately, life can throw a wrench into anything. It really shows what kind of person you are if you're willing to change or not willing to change.
Very good point. So, like, talking about life wrenches, I go back to Brittany at age 23 and a wrench was thrown in her life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably the biggest wrench I've experienced. My brain surgery.
That's what really is encouraging how you are open about talking about that and teaching us.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Being willing to be open about things and talking about them helps break down the taboos. That's what we should be doing as a society.
Season 3 of the VanRocha podcast is sponsored by Elomia Health. Did you know it can take 3 to 6 months for a patient to get their first appointment with a psychiatrist or a therapist? That's a very long wait. The AI mental health chatbot by Alomia is available 24/7 and immediate. Why not test drive Alomia at alomia.com? That's ELOMIA. See the future of AI for great mental health today. And now we'll get back to the episode.
When I was born, there was a small cluster of veins in my head that didn't form correctly. And so they formed kind of more of a pocket of blood. Unfortunately, it formed right in my right cerebellum, which is where a lot of your motor functions and things are located. When I was about 9 years old, they found that mass in my head, but it wasn't really doing anything. So they decided, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Well,
Mhm.
and you know, in the subsequent years, it bled a few times, which kind of left me with symptoms that were very much like a stroke. One side of my face really was paralyzed, but then the blood would dissipate back into my body and it would get better. When I turned 18, it bled right during finals week, my first semester at college. I used to be right handed, but the blood messed with my dexterity. So I had to learn how to write with my left hand.
Mm.
It's a lot easier to bounce back when you're young and very determined, which I was. So I went back to college, got good grades, decided to do an internship at a hotel in China.
Wait a minute. I'm, like, throwing off the train tracks now. I'm going from this girl, like, battling back, now she's going to China.
Yeah, my thought was, who does the internship in China? That'll be such a great talking point on my resume.
It's
Yeah, and I also thought when you are deciding on vacation, usually your first thought isn't, well, let's go to China. So I thought, hey, this is a once in a lifetime thing. I'll be learning while I am having fun. Let's go to China. I loved it, by the way. I loved it. China is a gorgeous country. But then I started to see my body exhibit some of the symptoms of my brain bleeding, which is losing balance, lower dexterity, and I knew it was bleeding again. I came home and went to go see my doctors at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. They let me know, hey, it's bleeding. We feel that it is now the right time to do brain surgery. Yeah, at that point, I was 23. There were a lot of factors that I looked at, one of them being medical care is not guaranteed for us here in the United States. We were coming up on a new presidential election. When you have pre existing conditions, presidential elections can be very scary because you just don't know, are you going to be able to get medical coverage or not? It's a huge thing. And the older you get, the bigger it is. I kind of remember that day like it was yesterday. Probably one of the hardest things I ever had to do in my life was saying goodbye to my family. Because when you go into a surgery like that, there's always a chance you're never going to wake up. The hardest part was saying goodbye to my mom and dad, letting them know that they did a good job and I really appreciated being their daughter. I don't exactly know what happens if you die, but that I hoped that I would see them again. If not here, then wherever we go in the afterlife. And then I walked down the hallway to go get my surgery. Yeah, and it left me with a lot of stroke like symptoms. So instead of just my face being half paralyzed. It was half my face being paralyzed, half my throat. My body forgot how to walk, how to eat, how to talk. I had a lot of therapy that I had to go through afterwards. And I was 23. It was a big blow to me. To be honest, for a long time, it was very depressing. And all I really wanted to do was go back to college and just have my life back, the life that I knew. But, eventually you come to realize that magic like that doesn't happen all the time. And sometimes you have to really sit down and be realistic about things.
I want to go back to a moment in time though, because you gave your farewell to your parents. That was the hardest thing. Then you walked down that corridor, but then eventually you didn't pass away. You woke up, but you couldn't
Yeah.
talk. So like, what was that reunion like when you saw them? Like you're laying on your back and eventually you're coherent. Can you take us there? That must be so amazing.
Yeah, it was. And I remember bits and pieces because, man, I was on some heavy sedation. But it's it was almost like seeing your best buddy that you haven't seen for 20 years, but you see them and it's like a day hasn't passed by. It's like you're home. Most of us, I would say, probably don't want to have to go through the tough times. But it really is the tough times that show what kind of person we are.
Explain that a little bit more because we all say that, but I think you have a lot of credibility in saying that. So, like, what do you mean when you say that?
It's very easy to grow through life when times are good and to be a kind person and to be upbeat and optimistic. But one of my dad's favorite sayings was when the going gets tough, the tough get going. When times do get tough, that's when your real personality shines through. You get pushed to see if you are still optimistic, pushed to see how kind you really are, pushed to see what your breaking point is. Because everyone has a breaking point. The tough times really, just like working out, it shows how you can become and who you want to become. It's like a muscle. If you keep working it, then eventually you'll get used to things. It shows who you are.
And now, a brief message from our sponsor, Alomia Health. Here's one of their co-founders, Nick Manzik.
We're building Alomia because we care about people and their mental health. You see those stats that pop up on news. You see them on article headlines. Mental health is declining. Social media is the issue. COVID was the issue. Debt, stress. The world is becoming a little more disconnected. At least that's what we're being told. We're not trying to replace therapists. We're trying to just give people another resource to work on their mental health. If we can be part of someone's mental health journey and help them start it or dive deeper or even get to a much better place, that's our goal.
Nick, thank you so much for that description of what Alomia does. Again, that's Alomia Health at alomia.com. ELOMIA. Now let's return to our conversation.
Eventually, insurance stopped paying for therapy. So I decided I'm 23. I still can't do much, but how dare people give up on me? Yeah, the insurance company is going to stop paying for stuff, but I'm 23 years old. I have to live the rest of my life in this body. And I used my anger for me. And I started going down to a gym that was in my apartment building, which is really nice, in Minnesota. It gets really cold during the winter, so pretty much everything is indoors. I started going to the gym every day for hours. I would listen to Lil Wayne just to, get my pump on and to kind of keep up that kind of angry, determined 23-year-old self. And eventually I started walking again. It's not great, but I'm still walking.
It's
The eating thing, because half my throat still is paralyzed. The doctors had wanted to keep me on a feeding tube the rest of my life. And I just, you never realize how much our lives revolve around food
Mhm.
until you can't eat it. After about a year or so of being on a feeding tube, I told my doctors, I can't do this anymore. I need to eat. If this leads to a lot of complications, I'll deal with it then. But I, I just have to do it. It was too depressing for me not to. And talking, well, you might guess, but I really just, I love to talk, and that just came through practice. Um, yeah, and a lot of it really was, talking to my family members and kind of gauging their reactions of how my volume was, if I was using the right words or not. That one took a while, and it was all kind of frustrating. I always used to say, I understand why babies don't formulate memories until they're 2 years old because learning all this stuff is hard. It's really hard.
Mhm. Mhm.
I have to say, it's still probably one of the hardest things that I've gone through. Of course, since then, I've been through other hard things. I had a kid, which I have to say is right up there with the toughest things I've done in my life. And he's not even teenager yet. So I can only think about the tough times that are gonna come, but the rewarding times that are coming with it.
Well, I read about your post of where you just went in for your routine visit, like when you were pregnant with him, and the doctor said, "We have to take him out today."
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I had preeclampsia, which actually affects, I wanna say, 15% of pregnancies. So it's actually a pretty decent number of pregnancies. I remember texting my husband too and letting him know, well, tonight we're gonna have a baby. And we hadn't even put his crib together or taken his car seat out of the box yet because we thought we still had 4 more weeks.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like the doctor was implying that you could have died if you had waited a week later, or your baby could have died. Isn't that the case?
Yes. Yeah, he let me know that if I had come the next week, it might have been a different story. It could have killed me, my son, or both of us.
Oh my
So,
goodness. That is blessing that you just came in then. My
right?
goodness.
That's what I'm talking about. You just have to go with the flow because there are wrenches. They're coming. You can't stop them.
When the pandemic started, you raised your game a notch to keep your team motivated as everyone started to have to work from home. Can you talk about what you did? Because it was encouraging me to see how you really took that wrench on.
I have to say that was actually one of my favorite times in my career. The pandemic was kind of a shaky time for all of us. It did give me the opportunity to really open up my communication and different avenues for people to express themselves. One of my favorite things that I did during the pandemic was I took my little Bitmoji, my little cartoon character, and I called her Flat Brittany. And I mailed her out to everyone in my department. I asked them to take a picture with Flat Brittany or show us what you do every day and take her on adventures. Let us know. And then I opened a channel up in Teams just for my department. Through that, we could also see people's authentic selves, maybe what they're doing in their individual lives. I think that was one of the cool things that working from home really gave us the opportunity to do was bring our authentic selves more to the workplace because we had to. Another thing that I also did with Flat Brittany, I would have a little one-on-one meeting every other week, and I'd call it Meet Me at the Water Cooler. And it would be just a little check-in, maybe a little bit more casual, because for me, it was more of a gauge to see how people were doing mentally, to make sure everyone was doing okay, especially during the pandemic when everything was really up in the air. But I
Hmm.
think we're still in a world where everything is up in the air. In the United States, our economy is going through a precarious time. We have elections coming up, and society on the whole in the US is going through a precarious time. And I think mental checks are still a necessity. They also help employees know that their leaders care about them as individuals. When I was a teenager, I used to listen to Pink Floyd. All in all, we're just another brick in the wall. The teenage angst would come out, and that that meant something different to me than it does today. Today, I feel like you want to fight and combat against people feeling like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
In high school, I felt like I was just another cog in the machine. But these days, you really do want to fight against that mentality because people aren't cogs in the machine. People really help drive and propel the world forward. And you need to encourage their creativity, encourage their personality. Communication is key to almost any relationship humans have.
What we have to get better at, like individuals who may not have a obvious physical disability, is we have to be more accommodating of individuals that have a disability. And you make a lot of references to people being able to tell you have a disability.
If I were talking to you face to face right now, you could definitely tell because I have some facial paralysis on the right side of my face, and it really becomes apparent when I am talking. Same with my walking too. I might have more of irregular gait. I can't actually run anymore either because one of the side effects of where in my brain this was is your ability to balance. So now I can run on an elliptical exerciser because I can hold myself up with my arms versus running out on the street or somewhere like that where I would depend on balance and my brain's ability to gauge where my feet are.
I'm so hopeful that more people will search you out and check out your postings. I mean, I like reading through your postings. I go back like a couple years and read through your postings, and even your husband Joshua, he's got some of your all-star postings on his
He's my biggest cheerleader.
your LinkedIn profile begins with you making a statement that there's 1 in 400 trillion chance of you being born.
Right? We're all pretty much miracles. Isn't it awesome, Gene? We won the race. We won the race. We're already winners. It gives me goosebumps when I think about it. I only have one son. Isn't it exceptional, like, how different each kid is? I know I talk to my mom about this often because there is me and I have a sister and a brother, and we're just all very different. we all look different from each other as well. So I ask her about that all the time, that how is it having so many different people, even though we all had the same genes to work with? And she says the same thing. It's, it's really amazing. What it all comes down to is each of us as individuals are amazing, and we should all treat each other like such.
Man, and it's the things that happen in this podcast. I really see when it's time to bring it to an end, and that's a drop the mic statement right there.